Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Johannes Bursch, and I'm the head of corporate language management at Daimler. And I'm delighted speaking at the Meta Forum as a user of language technology. Corporate language management at Daimler is not a language service department, as you can find in a lot of companies. And we don't operate as an internal language provider. We provide the translation and interpreting service, but we don't make it, so we don't translate or interpret. We organize the business, and we are managing the multilingual communication, all information processes. Let me show you what was thought about. Language is a means of transport, like the train that takes goods from Leipzig to Dresden. It carries through thoughts from one head to another. That said William Oswald, a German chemist, about 100 years ago. And just as you see, we don't go from Leipzig to Dresden anymore. We go to China, Vietnam, or India, or Ukraine, and that you can't do with its steam engine. So I want to show you Daimler, how it's spread around the world. The next, the role of corporate language management. And I want to show you the trends. The trends won't be new. You heard about this today as well, and what we think the areas of required actions have to be taken. Daimler has a lot of brands around the world. Daimler is known for MercedesBenz, you know Smart, you know the sporty type AMG, you know Maybach, and you know the trucks, Mercedes in the US, Freightliner. You might know Mitsubishi spread in Asia, but Western Star, Thomas Cook, Detroit Diesel, they are brands we build and sell as well. And in the vans, Mercedes-Benz, Daimler buses, Mercedes Setra, and Orion in the US. If you look, that's just to show you a little bit how we spread. We have production sites in 70 countries. These are just production sites which produce completely built-up cars. That means which are the parts delivered in these countries. And we have many other sites which we pre-build the cars and build them up in the country. Another 20 countries we build cars there. And especially here in Hungary, we started in Kecskemét, where we start a completely built-up site for cars. The sales sites, go back. The sales are in about 40 countries, the sales companies. That's not just dealers. And in these 40 countries, there is then a network for dealers all over the world. That means we have to communicate actually in every language of the world. Let's show how the role of corporate language management, how we define it. We are not a service provider, internal service provider. And if you think we have around 200 communication processes, so which are the source language, mostly German, for example, the production side, marketing information, and the customer information. And that means that we then try to standardize, otherwise we have to have 200 information and translation processes, and we don't want to do that, and we not yet have plug-in technology. So they can easily plug in the translation process to the authoring process. So you have to standardize the processes, and of course you have to standardize the terminology. Otherwise you get in every translation process the terminology of this process. And further on I explain why you can't have that. And then the publication across all media types, and it goes to the different users of the information, but mainly on focus of the customer. Even if it's in the car, telematics, for example, you don't have any lamps anymore who blink when your oil level is too low. It says you the oil level is too low, so you need it in every country, in every language. You have the customer information and the workshop information. Just an example here for the range of service, the telematic. You have telematic here. You have telematic in the trucks. They are all, again, different because there are different means and different use of the telematics. You have service, press information, sales literature, so quite common, and you have the owner manuals or the workshop information. And just to give you an example, in former days, the first step, mechanic was opening the hood in the car and looks maybe what was wrong or listens or hear. And today, the first step, you plug in your computer in the interface before you open the hood. And then you read what is in the store. And then maybe you start opening your hood. So the information and the process in the service is completely changed, and completely changed to information which is needed. So in former days, you had the main languages, main European languages all over the world for the service literature. Now you need to translate every information into the special, into the country language. To point out what the role is, I just want to take this here for this audience. We have to ensure the innovation of languages, processes, and multilingual data systems and process across core process and divisions. That means what I showed you before with a big arrow. We have to gain that that this information you produce actually in your research work, we implement in our processes. Another role has to say we need to have optimal, stable process and process standardization as a basis of a smooth running international communication. And how we do that? Operating a service strategy, implementing process development. It means we have to manage the suppliers because we don't translate. We have around 100 suppliers. And 100 suppliers means for around 35 to 40 languages all over the world. In every information, we translate or let translate around 1 million pages a year. That means about 25 million lines a year. That's quite a bit. And that you only can do with good customers and good processes. And ensuring a standardization of consistently terminology. What trends? You heard about trends today. Of course, we see the same trends. We see that the growing complexity of the products and new technology means that it's a growing need of information and communication. So as you know, the business is growing. It's a big business. And the business is growing because there is a need of communication. But as a manager of one department, you know, some of you are managers and responsible for the money as well. That means you have to do a growing task with the same amount of money. That's one big thing to do. And you only can solve this with technology. Increasing development means as well interconnections between the data. You don't have a single information workflow, so you don't have the translation of the information in one information process. They're all linked together more or less, and so you need to make sure that you have the information standardized in every point of contact with the customer. The third is that you don't only have, from our side, the information from German or English into any other languages. We communicate from one to another language because we don't have any centralized design and development department in Germany. You have for every other FUSO example in Japan or Detroit Diesel, you have the designing department locally. So you have to communicate in every direction. And which areas requires action? I think we have three. That might mean supplier management is one. And for this audience requirement, it requires process and system integration. If you think we, for example, don't work with Stratos, we work with Transit, for example. That means our suppliers have to work with Transit. But why? Because it's not open source. And I think if it's growing, I think one of the very important thing is that technology is more open source, because otherwise the translators have to switch to 5 or 6 different tools. So why not using their tool if it's possible to integrate in the process? The second is that terminology standardization. You have to standardize the technology before you start translation. Normally, you start translation and then you think, oh, I have a new feature. How do you call that? I mean, and we do the terminology, we handle it like a part. If you design a part, you have to name the part, and then you have to localize the part as well in every language. And then you're early enough for every translation issue. And then that is a basis to have a standardized terminology. And for that, you need proper terminology management. Of course, system and tool based. And the third is standardization of translation processes. I said a lot about it. It means standard interfaces to the upstream and downstream process, compatible support and authoring tools. It means it's not enough to have translation tool. You need authoring tools as well, and they have to be combined. And you have to have real-time translation. You talked about a lot about the translation, machine translation, and you need workflows. Otherwise, you can't do the job in this scale. That's what I wanted to show you, and it means language is, of course, still a means of transport, I think, and it carries thoughts from one head to another. But we have to do that with other solutions than steam engines today, and that's you to have to provide these solutions. Thank you very much.